All right, we're going to get started here. Welcome everyone to the first edition of the PDXYZ webinar series. I'm Brad Cohen, co-founder of the Pier 150. Honored to have our first speaker for the PDXYZ series, Jayanta Jenkins, with us today. Just to give a little background on the PDXYZ as a whole, we launched this event in Portland this last summer, and really what it was all about is bridging the generational gap in business, talking about equality, coming as you are, and it really kind of took a flavor of its own, and we were extremely thrilled and excited about it. We had over 300 executives from across the country. We're excited for this year. Obviously, COVID kind of took a little hit on that one, and so Jayanta was confirmed to speak at the PDXYZ event, and so we thought this would be a great kind of flow into what we're doing with the PDXYZ webinar series. So we're really honored and excited to have him. I'm thrilled that he was able to do this, and yeah, we're just really looking forward to this. So what I'm going to do is just go through over a few logistics, and then we'll get going on that. So let me share my desktop real quick. So a little bit of the background. Obviously, the Pier 150, we have all of our different virtual programs here. You can go on there and take a look. In terms of the Zoom, there's a Q&A portion in the bottom. There's a chat. Please continually, we want as much interaction as possible as we continue to go through this. Next week, this is our Friday, the Friday series. These will be the next two different webinar programs that we're going to be having. We'll send out an email afterwards about the different upcoming events. But without further ado, I kind of want to jump straight into this. And what we're going to start with, I think obviously this is an extremely important topic that we're dealing with right now. And I'm going to start with a video that Jayanta helped produce or did produce for Procter & Gamble called The Look. So let's get that going real quick. Whoops, sorry. So without further ado, I think maybe the best bet would be to introduce Jayanta and let him talk a little bit about his background, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Greetings, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. But if you're on the West Coast, absolutely good morning. That's where we are. Thank you for having me, Mike, and give me an opportunity to share a bit of my background and my experiences and kind of, just share my perspectives. I got my start at the Martin Agency back in it's kind of weird. I never thought I was going to be the person that would like pause before I said what year I started in this business, but I've been in the business that long now. Back in 1997 is when I started my career at the Martin Agency, and I've had a really amazing journey between places that have really been about craft and doing impactful work. One of the things that the Martin Agency put into the world is Virginia's for Lovers, which is still, very much part of the platform for the state of tourism in Virginia. But just, I've been very fortunate to have worked amongst a lot of really great leaders, supportive people, and to journey through this industry and build on my experiences and a lot of the support that I've been given. I was at Wieden & Kennedy, which brought me to the West Coast back in 2000, working with a lot of wonderful people there, and a lot of wonderful people at Nike as well, which then, brought me to Chiat Day to work with Lee Clow, so Mike Hughes at the Martin Agency, Dan Wieden at Wieden & Kennedy, and Lee Clow at Chiat. And, again, it's just been a really phenomenal journey through the last 20 years. And a lot of what you're seeing in something like The Look just comes from collective experiences, doing things wrong, building trust, and really having a point of view or a voice that you get to hone by being in this business, and bring it to light through strategy, through collaboration, through execution, and also really wanting to, help people see things and I like to say, help celebrate our similarities and not our differences. So I've been very, very honored and humbled to be able to create the work that I have and continue to grow as a leader in this business. So that's a little bit of a overview. 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe if you wouldn't mind, kind of with The Look that just came, that we just watched, maybe talk a little bit about your perspective in terms of how you came to that, kind of the purpose behind it. Obviously, I think is very well done, but also what inspired you and how it came to fruition.
Yeah. It inspired us. And when I say us, I mean, I got to co-found a nonprofit called Saturday Morning with Jeff Edwards, Keith Cartwright, Kwame Taylor Hayford, and Deja Cox. And, Saturday Morning was founded, we had no intention of it becoming what it has grown into. Back in 2016, Keith Cartwright had sent out a text message in the summer of 2016. We just turned 4 years in July last week. And, Philando Castile, Michael Brown, there were so many deaths that were happening, shootings that were happening in the summer of 2016. And it was, I mean, unfortunately, we can get into this. Unfortunately, the normalization of police violence and killings and shootings and acquittals, there's certain things in our society that have been normalized to the point of becoming just background noise. And in the summer of 2016, there was just such a back-to-back issues around young Black men being killed and then police officers being acquitted. And Keith Cartwright had sent out a text message to myself, Jeff Edwards, and Jimmy Smith. And Keith, like Jimmy Smith, like Jeff Edwards, like myself, we were just watching the news, and my heart, I wouldn't say heartbroken, it was just a heaviness, And Keith simply said, we need to say something. We need to do something. So he invited the three of us to the Rose Cafe in Venice, California. And we sat down that morning and just really, we knew of each other. Jimmy Smith and I had worked together. But Jeff Edwards and Keith and I, we had all worked in similar networks and similar sort of categories. And we just began to talk about our experiences as African Americans in this country. Keith being from Texas, Jimmy and Jeff being from Michigan, and myself being from Virginia. And how living this sort of dual existence. And I say that in the best way. So, being African American, there's a duality of, existing. It's almost like being bilingual, but culturally bilingual, where you live a Black experience, but you also live a very sort of, a white experience in terms of being in a world that you're a minority or considered a minority. So, and there's all of the things that come with that, which really you could see in how we were able to execute and get the storytelling and the look. That's the prequel. So your question is, how that came about. So we were able to put a letter into existence. It was basically a call to the industry to create a brief for peace. And we got the attention of Mark Pritchard at Procter & Gamble. And so again, I'm just journeying you to the point of where we got to with the look, how we got to the look. The fantastic part about Mark Pritchard and his organization, and I know we're going to get into this later in this discussion, is Procter & Gamble, like let's say a Nike or even an Apple, have been doing, Nike more specifically, but Procter & Gamble has been doing this work around inclusion for quite some time. And they had done a piece called The Talk, which was very similar to the look, but it was about the talk that African-American parents give their children, be it around, be careful when you go outside, or, someone saying that you're pretty for a Black girl is not a compliment. And so these are conversations that are generational, and that was the point of The Talk. But one of the things The Talk did that it missed as a blind spot, it wasn't intentional, but it was a blind spot, is it did not include Black fathers in the messaging. It was all mothers. And, there's a stigma in the Black community and around Black fatherhood, either kids growing up without them, or just this representation of Black men is not a part of the family, which, you think about TV shows and like Good Times or, The Cosby Show, but, we've been working through it and things have gotten better, but The Talk actually left that out. So when we started to have our conversations with Mark, we basically pointed out the fact that The Talk did not include Black fathers, and that was a huge misstep. So the whole initiative really became around Black Men Love, was sort of the initiative that we were given. And then we strategically worked and sort of built in the platform for dimensionalized Black men's love as a point of view on unconscious bias. And, that's essentially where that was born, without getting too deep, because we could take a whole hour just talking about that.
Yeah, no, totally understand. And so when you obviously, when you're talking about The Talk and the look, and I think especially in your profession, diversity in the advertising industry is an issue obviously very close to you. Is Saturday Morning, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on what Saturday Morning's mission is in regards to that, and how kind of you're faring in that regards.
The mission of Saturday Morning is to create messaging that really creates, to extend the idea that that Black lives are just as important as all lives, and create messaging that celebrates and sort of brings to light the upliftment of Black men, Black people, all people, but through brands and through creating very, impactful and thought-provoking conversation-starting platforms. And, the projects we've taken on have been with Spotify. We were brought on to them to do a Black History Month initiative, but we turned it into a celebration of Black History Year around the idea of music and the contributions of African Americans in the music industry. And also not to regulate that to just a month, because it's an ongoing, very dynamic thing that happens. And, American history is Black history. American history is Asian in all different types of cultures. And so, we've been doing things like that really, have helped dimensionalize and create a more holistic approach for brands to think about inclusion, as opposed to doing, a tent pole, like not tent pole, but to, there's this calendar approach to D&I. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're doing the work like all the time, then these aren't calendar points, they're not inflection points, they're moments of celebration. So we've been very fortunate to work with Procter & Gamble, P&G, Spotify, and a few other brands to really help bring this type of thinking to their organizations and to put it into the form of, communication into the world.
Yeah, no, that's great. And one thing I wanted to, when I was doing some research and reading different articles about yourself and Saturday Morning and everything that you've done, obviously you've worked, like you mentioned, with a lot of large corporations. What is the correlation kind of between your, I would say, outgoing brand and your culture internally? And are there some aspects of, working together, like when you go to, let's say, Procter & Gamble, is the look a reflection of internally what they view at Procter & Gamble, and kind of has that kind of concept? And maybe if you could just explain a little bit more on how culture and the marketing brand kind of coincide.
I mean, it's not a complicated question, but I'll try to answer it very simplistically. When you're doing the work internally, you don't have to, messages like that coming from Procter & Gamble, there's no tension in terms of that message, their point of view, and wanting to put something into the world to start a conversation to bring people together. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very unique organization in that way. Nike is a very unique organization in that way. They have always done the work, and the work is in showing up in very authentic ways, not to appropriate or to, take on conversation because they'll get more impressions or get more anything, but it's just because it's the right thing to do, Mm-hmm. So we have been very fortunate and thoughtful in our approach to partnering with brands that have an internal awareness that helps people like my organization with Saturday Morning do the things that we do. So we're not coming in and having to sort of we're not creating a bridge towards how to do these things and put them into the world in a meaningful way. We have support. And so I hope that gets to the heart of your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think that the other aspect that I want you to touch base on is, what about those organizations that maybe aren't taking a stand, and maybe holding back a little bit because they don't want to say the wrong thing or what they're doing? What kind of insight could you help them with in that regards? And even, with, white privilege and all of that aspects, even from, my perspective, I would love to hear it from you. And what can they do internally?
Well, let me really just first say that I this is subjective, and I don't have the answers, nor do I have advice. Okay. But I can speak from my experiences in being in the rooms of people that have empowered and supported me to do some of the things that you've recognized, and that really helped me celebrate what I love about being in this business. So what I'll say to you is, it starts with having an organization that is diverse, because if you as an organization are having a difficult time trying to articulate how and why to put things into the world, then I might guess that the organization lacks a bit of diverse thinking, because I think the places that do, these conversations are worked out internally, and you develop an approach that doesn't feel like it's going to miss the mark because you have the thinking in the building. And so that's a place to start, and I think as Saturday Morning, we have been brought in, and we've looked at organizations, and we've had to, say no, because they just didn't have the right internal operating structure that would allow them to unlock the potential of doing something impactful or utilizing us in a way that could really help, them enter in the conversation in an authentic way. Mm-hmm. So, I think we're in a really unique time. I turned 50 this year, I turned 50 this month, which that's a whole separate thing. But what I'm starting to advance toward is the conversation of inclusion and leadership and people wanting to be in this business because it's an amazing business. It's been going on for decades, you know? And so organizations that have diverse thinking and people that look like me, look like you, look like the way the world looks, I think have the ability to have the right ingredients to push and pull and to really help get beyond this. How do you say something to, you know, women? How do you say something to the LGBTQ community? How do you say something to Black folks? I mean, if you have the representation in your walls, then that's step one. That's a pretty powerful step one, you know? And it gets me to a point of now that I am approaching my 50s and I have been in this business, you know, quite some time. My responsibility is being creative. That's just the cost of entry. That's what I do. But the bigger opportunity as a leader now is to get into organizations, continue to build interdependency around the right things from a business operating standpoint, but also through the lens of inclusion, and also to create a line of sight from an executive room to a VP level to down the line into the high school educational system and into the communities to build a pipeline and to have a very selfless approach to how I get to show up as a business leader. And that's very exciting to me. And I think it should be very exciting to companies, agencies, all walks, all aspects of life, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, I respect that a lot. And I think the challenging part is, and you and I were speaking about it earlier a couple days ago, is talking about that aspect of making an environment feel safe to make a mistake internally. And I think that's a big challenge with a lot of companies, is people don't want to make a mistake and say something wrong. And do they, you know, is that aspect of, is silence worse than making a mistake?
You know, we are in an important time, and no one wants to step out and be a part of cancel culture and say the wrong thing, and then all of a sudden you're dismissed. I think silence is deadly, you know, because I think this is a time when people want to know what people stand for and what they represent. But here's the other thing. Myself, I'm not into victim mentality or victimizing or shaming and blaming people for doing the right or wrong thing. And I think we have to give each other permission to enter into these conversations in a way that brings us together, period. And yes, it kind of, you know, it's disappointing when you have a brand that doesn't say something, and it's disappointing when a brand has never entered in the conversation and says the wrong thing. But, you know, I just don't think we're in a place where, if there's no malicious intent, I'm not going to sit back and, you know, and really shame anyone for saying the wrong thing. And because that's not where we need to be at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yes, again, to your point, yes, it is not great to be silent, but, you know, at the same time, people have to find their way into this conversation in a very authentic way, in a very real way. And I'm myself, and I know you're included in this, we're not sitting here waiting for someone to make a mistake so we can say, see, I told you.
Yeah. And I think,
go ahead.
yeah. And I do think that people have that mentality, which I think is part of the educational aspect, to get them through that, to make them realize it is okay to make a mistake and have that, like you said, the confidence and the education behind it. I think that from my perspective, having two young girls, is educating them from the get-go about the social injustice that's were going on and continuing, but really focusing on that educational aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Kind of switching gears a little bit, I want to get your perspective, and I've done a little bit about it, but the campaign that won the Grand Prix that you did, I'd love for you to be able to kind of elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, you're talking about Twitter. Yeah, Twitter was a really amazing experience for me. Getting an opportunity to get into tech and social media platform, to work with Jack Dorsey, Leslie Berland, and to be a part of that organization at a time when they were kind of in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
When I got there, they hadn't been profitable. Their IPO launch was probably around 70. And when I got there, the stock price was at probably $19. There were people leaving the platform in droves because of the harassment that was happening. And Twitter was really plagued by, if something good happened on Twitter, people loved it. If something bad happened on Twitter, people hated it. So they needed to really find their center. And I got to be a part of that organization when that happened. And, the truth about Twitter is it is, and is articulated as, and how we used to talk about, or how it's still talked about, is Twitter serves the public conversation. And I think when Twitter really got behind that as a North Star, we began to operate from that idea. And so the very first thing I did, to your point, was a out-of-home initiative that was meant to help people understand the why of Twitter. And I remember I started on my birthday in 2016, August 29th. And I think probably within 7 days, or less than 7 days, I was given the brief that they wanted to do something around the upcoming election. And I only had it was 7 days from the point of actually getting the brief to present something to Jack. And I remember not freaking out, but I remember just walking through the halls and looking around at everything. Was hashtag word this, that, or the other thing. And if you think about how brands use hashtags, and it just became an add-on, for brands to go hashtag whatever, because they really weren't pointing at conversation, I think, in a meaningful way. But let me get to the point. So I ended up working with my team and doing a whole bunch of different iterations of how do you sort of create something very simple that helps people understand the why of Twitter. And I remember sitting, and I took a hashtag and put it next to an image. And if there was an unlock that happened in that moment, and it just began to, it was awesome, because basically what that discovery for me was, the hashtag is something Twitter put into the world first as digital lexicon. And they're the only ones that could really truly own it in a meaningful way, because it's their platform. And it was as much a product campaign as it was an awareness campaign. And really strategically, what we pulled out of that was Twitter is a platform that shows sides and doesn't take sides. And it was such a massive unlock. And as a student of Lee Clow, if you think about the really beautiful, impactful work he did for Think Different, those out-of-home pieces, I love Lee, and I've said this to Lee, I absolutely channeled my inner Lee Clow and Dan Wyden and Mike Hughes, all of my advertising experience and craft and strategy, and sort of developing and creating that work with everyone at Twitter. And I'm very proud of that work. I'm very, very proud of it. So that's sort of the genesis of that. And, it started with the one piece that we launched with was Hillary Clinton's eyes and Trump's eyes. This was right around the time when they were debating. And it was just very, very, very powerful, very simple. And man, it invited you into a conversation. So what I loved about that approach was didn't tell you how to think. It invited you into a conversation. And I think some of the best work that I really love does that. It invites people into an experience. And, you know, it was a unique moment in time, and it really launched a bunch of different initiatives that we ended up doing for Twitter. And what I also really appreciated was it was as much as a internal sort of galvanizing piece of work or platform as it began to sort of help Twitter in terms of, you know, brands and consumers and all of the other sort of aspects of the business that really needed to be supported. And I think the Twitter experience really enabled me to think more broadly and show up as a business leader in terms of solving objectives through creativity, as opposed to just being a creative. And that has been my stance throughout my career. But you started this off with the Grand Prix winning, and it's like that's the byproduct. If it had never won anything, I would still be very proud of it, you know. And I'm not against awards, but I think I love being rewarded by cultural impact. And then, you know, if something wins an award, then that's just an affirmation of that it was resonant, you know.
Mm-hmm. And then in talking about that, I loved how you said Twitter kind of, they're not telling you how to think, they're just provoking your thought process to be able to look both ways. What about some different campaigns that maybe take a little bit more of a political stance and, you know, are forcing one way? So we had Amy Smith, who is the chief giving officer of Tom's. She spoke at the PDXYZ last year with Abel Navarrete at Columbia, kind of talking about the ups and downs of when a company takes a political stand, and the challenges that are kind of around that. I don't think you specifically worked on, you know, Nike's Colin Kaepernick one specifically, but can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on talking about, you know, when they do kind of, maybe some challenges that do come up when companies decide to maybe not play down the middle of the path, but focus on one side or the other?
Yeah. Well, with Nike, I don't think they were overtly trying to be provocative. I think they support athletes and athletes with purpose. And, you know, there were things that I did with the Twitter campaign that were very much on point with what was happening in culture in terms of the police shootings and things of that nature. I feel that intentionally trying to provoke a situation can put you in an awkward space unless you really have the true intention of trying to dimensionalize something in a way to bring people together. Mm-hmm. So I'm not, you know, I can't speak to the Tom's thing. And I think even when you bring up the Nike example, I don't think they were trying to be provocative or sort of like, you know, create a ripple in the cultural fabric to sort of, you know, say we this is right and everyone else is wrong. I think that there was like the Colin Kaepernick thing. Let's just talk about that for a second. Look at how the George Floyd moment is caught up to what Kaepernick was saying years ago.
Yep.
So that's not I don't think Nike standing alongside Kaepernick to really help all of us look at our nation and ask some really thought-provoking questions. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to answer your question in the way you posed it to me, because I think if it's in a company's DNA to speak on issues that are important to them, that's not trying to be provocative. That's basically reinforcing what you believe, which is why the Ben and Jerry's thing is really great, you know? So, you know, I don't exist nor collaborate, I think, with individuals personally or professionally that just kind of say, how do we shake things up?
Yeah. It goes back to even what you were talking about with your culture and brand. And that is Nike's kind of brand, is supporting their athletes and doing all that stuff. And it is just who they are. They weren't trying to provoke something.
Yeah.
I would also like to, if we could, I think it's really fascinating just to hear your perspective on the different campaigns that you worked on. One specifically that you were there for quite some time, but Beats by Dre and Apple. Could you talk a little bit more about what maybe you've done, what you did there, and work with Dr. Dre and Jimmy and stuff like that?
Yeah. Again, I have relationships are everything in this business. And when I got to work with Omar Johnson, Jason White, and occasionally with Jimmy Iovine and a lot of other really wonderful people at that company, Beats, because of its founders, had a very unique sort of lens on culture. And when I got there to be supportive, I got to work with one of my most favorite athletes of all time, Serena Williams. And it was 2015, and Serena was almost on the verge of like the Serena Slam, which was like, I think she would have, if she had won Flushing Medals is US Open, she would have like done something that only Steffi Graf, I'm messing that up. But we created we wanted to do something to celebrate this journey that she was on. And Serena's experience is coming from Compton and just, I mean, her experience her experience is the Black experience, and through achievement and through just being an absolute amazing athlete and individual, she continues to rise and rise and rise, and she always has from her childhood. So Jimmy Iovine had found a song by Andra Day called Rise Up, which became the soundtrack that we used for this film that we did for Serena. And what the film did was it really celebrated her journey. And what was really unique about that piece of film, when Omar and Jason and all of us did that, because I've worked on a lot of athlete stuff over the last 20 years. If you were to watch that film right now, and I suggest if you have time after this, watch it. It's the first piece that I did where, and because she didn't win that year, but because of the message, because of who she is, the relevance of that message, it could be played now. It was played then. And it was one of the first pieces that I had done where win or lose, it remained timeless. And if there's one thing that I'm very proud of and throughout my career is one, consistency, and two, being able to work with people that I've collaborated with, built trust with, listened to enable all of us to do very impactful and meaningful work. I'm very, very proud if I look back from the look to some of my very beginnings in this industry, there's a consistency. And there's a through line of impact and purpose. And that was very much part of what I brought with me and was a part of, at Beats by Dre with everyone there. Because it's still a very special organization. And Omar Johnson put me in a very awkward and uncomfortable situation in a good way. And he took me out of my comfort zone because I had worked in agencies for about 14 years, and he and Jason really created a unique and very special opportunity for me that gave me the line of sight to how I'm now being able to show up on the brand side. So that, and I love those individuals, and they're a huge part of my transformation as a business professional.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, it's fascinating to hear that. And I think that's what we all aspire to be, is to get outside of the comfort level, but also thrive in that. But then when you start talking about this, how you were just mentioning, Serena Williams back in 2015, going all the way back, I want to get your perspective on, because it feels like we're making progress. In this Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. But at the same time, you look back and we're dealing with the exact same stuff that we've dealt with forever. So from your perspective, are you confident? How are we, how in your opinion, how are we doing, and are we doing the right things?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I throw that away. I do know. Well, I have an opinion. I have a thought. But I think that's a pretty, not a heavy question, but I think it's a question that, you know, I was talking to a really good friend last night, and the conversations that we're having, actually, I was watching Hamilton as well for the first time. The conversations we're having aren't new, and they've been going on since the 1860s, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, what is actually going to have to um, happen for us to meaningfully come together and push this thing forward, and this thing being our culture, how we collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, white privilege is real.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had to work, you know, maybe 20 times as hard to get to a point of even being in front of you, in front of this forum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't easy, nor should it have been. And I think, you know, where do we go from here? I think there's a lot of self-investigation that needs to happen um, from the white community, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
think African Americans for decades, for centuries, have been put into a very compromised situation because of this idea of, you know, elitism, you know,
Yeah.
which is basically designed as a means to control power and resources, you know. So if you really want me to break this down, I can, but I think we're just in a space where I feel the conversation is caught up to the moment. Hopefully we won't normalize things that to the point where we have to have such an uprising to get people's attention to say enough is enough. We want to contribute. We want to be here. We want to thrive. We want to do it together, you know? And what are you willing to give up to allow the opportunity for all of us to come to the table to bring us as a collective to a very beautiful and meaningful place where we thrive in unison, you know? And that's the tip of the iceberg of sort of how I've been thinking about this, you know, over the last few weeks and over my lifetime for that matter. And, you know, like people like myself, just honestly, I love what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I love what I do. And working 20 times as hard, I would do that no matter what the situation was, because I genuinely have had the best time in my entire life being in this profession, you know. But, you know, I think, you know, back to your question, we just need to continue to channel empathy. We need to continue to investigate our prejudices and not be okay with it, but just identify it and sit with it. That's what this moment in time has done for me, sheltering in place and pausing. I've been traveling nonstop for 20 years and uniquely even more so over the last 10 months. And having had the opportunity to just take a deep breath and feel all of the deep pain and sorrow for the people who are out there suffering right now without jobs, who have lost loved ones, and to be in a unique position to be able to like reflect on that. What I want to, how I want to move forward is how I am moving forward is understanding what I want to take forward with me as we progress and what I want to leave behind. And I have a 2-year-old son, you know, it's very important to be as empathetic and as caring and as thoughtful as we progress as a people, white, black, whatever the case may be, and to use our business to channel as much good as possible. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm going to continue to push and be selfless. And, that's it, man. Sorry. I've just been thinking very, very deeply about all of this. And I'm very encouraged and hopeful to see the solidarity and the beautiful sort of approaches that people are taking to ensure that we continue to try to do the right things.
Yeah. No, I thank you for that. And it is, I think you're right. I mean, I know you're right. It's what we all need to do. And one thing you specifically said is that I kind of hit me was we all need to investigate our prejudices. And, like you said, you got to sit back and in this time of COVID has helped that ability to be able to sit back and take some time to really deeply think about those concepts. So one, I want to thank you for opening up about that and your son and that stuff. So absolutely loved it. I do want to, we did just get a question here that I wanted to kind of throw out to you. And it's basically kind of talking about showing up authentically. Companies have to do work internally. And someone asked, can you speak to some of the work that you've seen done internally with P&G or Nike, for example, that have represented authentic inclusivity?
Yeah, I mean, they have very diverse, thoughtful leadership. And Mark and Damon Jones, at Nike, one of my dear friends, Alex Lopez. There's a lot of people at Nike that live an external existence that they bring with them that helps do the work that they get to contribute to. And I think one of the other things that is really important, just in general, is you kind of said it, but being vulnerable and embracing a little bit of the unknown. The vulnerability is one of the strongest tools I have channeled in this part of my career, and being open to being wrong and not being completely hard on myself for failing. And I think, because these things, we're discovering and figuring them out together, so there's a bit of permission to listen and to fail and to embrace these things in a way where we ultimately we're supporting one another. And that's what I love about P&G as an organization. That's what I really respect and admire about Wieden Kennedy as an organization. That's what I love about Jack Dorsey as an individual. That's what I appreciate about Nike. That's what I love about Prince, or love, because he's no longer with us. Like we have so many beautiful models of when it works, how it makes us feel and how it marches us toward the greater good, Yep.
And I think this is a great follow-up question is, in your opinion, you don't need to influence too much, but where would you start when you work with leaders who don't necessarily get it or don't see it?
Yeah. Compassion. That's where I start. And unless there's maliciousness there, and I've yet to encounter that, I start with compassion, because it's like, if you go back to the Twitter piece, you want to invite someone into a conversation and not make them feel like shit if they don't get it.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you can do. So if someone doesn't know, that, you hire someone smarter than you. If you don't know, you say, I don't know. Please give me a perspective that helps me create the understanding so I have the tools to have the discussion in a meaningful way. It's that simple.
Yeah. I think people are afraid to say, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't. I legitimately, I can, I've been doing a lot of work just to be able to show up and be present and be vulnerable and be open and embrace the unknown. And through that journey, what ends up sort of taking over in a good way is heart and soul, and you feel through these things, and then you use the sort of collective tools of allyship and people that want to support you and not fail, and you end up learning and growing in a beautiful way. So I want to say something quickly because, at Saturday Morning, or with Saturday Morning, Keith Cartwright, who just started his own company called Cartwright at WPP, props to Keith, and Jeff Edwards, who had just started a new role as well at Gale, and Kwame Taylor Hayford, who started his own company called Ken, and Deja, who's in graduate school. I'm working alongside some amazing power players, right?
Yep.
But here's the thing that's interesting, and I'll get back to your point about what you asked. We all complement each other's strengths, and we complement each other's weaknesses. And so in that model, for me, I've now understood in terms of designing teams, which I'm now engaged in doing, is how do you create symbiotic, interdependent teams that support each other's weaknesses, so you empower each other along the way. And I think that, again, back to the question about how do you enter into a discussion with someone who may have a lesser awareness, that's why you're being brought into the discussion to help, fill in some blind spots,
I totally agree. I think someone just mentioned talking about, working in the workplace and trying to educate those to realize what white privilege is, and the connotation with that, and how I think this gentleman just said, kind of learning more of ourselves on who we are is one of the very first steps that we all need to take.
Yeah, and I'm also I'm a word person. I love syntax. I love words, and I think the intention behind words can actually shape an experience one has. So it's like, I want to empower. I don't want to educate. I want to empower. I want to inform. I'm not going to push. And on a good day, I'll lead. I'll lean back. I think the words we use around this discussion are very, very, very important, because they're tactical cues to how people are being informed how to, you can help someone enter into a discussion without there being tension.
Mm-hmm,
and, that I'll just leave that right there.
No, I love it. Well, we're coming up to about 5 minutes left, and I kind of want to just throw it over to you, John, to see if they had any kind of closing comments, kind of wrap things up, as we continue on this focus and so on. I would love to kind of just hear your closing comments on it.
You know what? I don't have any closing comments. I think this entire discussion has been really phenomenal for me, and I hope that I was able to show up in a really authentic way and share some things that help people get a little bit more understanding of how I think, how I've worked, and how maybe some of those things might be transferable to the profession we're in. I think we have an amazing opportunity as a collective to continue to support one another to do amazing things. This isn't a moment in time. This is an opportunity to continue to define the moment. It's an opportunity to continue to define the moment. And that's going to be the difference maker in when you and I and everyone else on this Zoom call look back on things, 6 months from now, or a year from now, or 24 months from now. Actually, interestingly enough, a really good friend of mine, we set up a yearly meeting to discuss where we are versus then and now. So I think I'm fortunate that I'm surrounded by 100+ people on this call, yourself, my family, and my close colleagues, that we're all committed to defining the moment.
I totally agree, and I want to just say thank you, one, for feeling like you've made me a better person just from knowing you in the last few bits, like you said, educating and having these conversations. Shout out to Eric Gabrielson at Friends of the Children for connecting you and I. And I just think this was absolutely fantastic. I want to thank you so much for being our first PDXYZ webinar participant. And it truly it meant a lot to me personally. So I just want to say thank you, Jayanta.
You're welcome.
And thank you for everybody for joining. We'll send out a post-event link with the recording. I'll confirm with Jayanta just to make sure. And then we will see you hopefully next week, and we'll send you all that information.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jayanta.